The Tallow Skulker, a tale of Harrow's Bend. The Tallow Skulker. The town of Harrow's Bend wasn't much to look at, just a smudge of clapboard houses and cracked sidewalks squatting along a forgotten stretch of Illinois highway. The kind of place where the streetlights buzzed faintly and the air always smelled of damp earth and regret. By the winter of '98, most folks had already left, chasing jobs or just running from the quiet that seemed to choke the life out of everything. Those who stayed didn't talk much, but when they did, it was about the thing in the alleys, the thing they called the Tallow Skulker. It started with the handprints, greasy, uneven smears on windowsills and doorknobs, glistening under the sodium glow of the few streetlights that still worked. At first, people thought it was kids messing around, maybe some punk with a jar of lard and too much time. But the prints kept showing up, night after night, always in places you wouldn't expect. The second-story window of old Mrs. Carter's place, the rusted hood of a car that hadn't moved in years. They weren't just smudges either. Up close, you could see the whorls of fingerprints, too big and too twisted to belong to anything human. Tommy Reardon was the first to touch one. He was 16. Cocky, the kind of kid who'd dare you to jump off the grain silo just to see if you'd do it. One night, he found a handprint smeared across the back door of the abandoned diner on Polk Street. "Looks like bacon grease," he'd laughed, dragging his fingers through it before anyone could stop him. The next morning, his mom found him curled up in bed, shivering under 3 blankets, his skin clammy and his eyes wild. He wouldn't talk, just stared at the wall, muttering about something heavy sitting on his chest all night. By noon, he was gone. No note, no tracks, just an empty bed and a faint, rancid smell lingering in the room. Word spread fast after that. Don't touch the grease. Don't look for it. Don't talk about it. But Harrow's Bend was small, and secrets didn't stay buried. People started seeing it, or at least catching glimpses. A shape slipping behind the dumpster at the gas station, low and hunched, its body glistening like wet wax under the flickering lights. A silhouette dragging itself through the alley behind the church, leaving a slick trail that steamed in the cold. One guy, a trucker named Dale, swore he saw it up close, said it was made of dripping fat, pale and yellowed, with arms that bent wrong and fingers that twitched like they were feeling the air for something warm. He didn't stick around to find out what. The thing didn't scream or howl like the monsters in movies. It didn't need to. It was the weight that got you, the suffocating, invisible press that came after you touched its leavings. Ellen Pritchard, who ran the corner store, brushed against a handprint on her shop window one night while locking up. She made it home, but her husband said she slept like the dead, barely breathing, her face twisted like she was fighting something off. When she woke, she whispered about a dream. A mound of rancid tallow pinning her down, its surface rippling as it sank into her skin. She didn't leave the house after that. A week later, her husband found the bed empty, the sheets stained with a greasy film that wouldn't wash out. By spring, Harrow's Bend was half empty. The ones who stayed learned the rules. Lock your doors, shutter your windows, never follow the smell. Because that's how it hunted, luring you with a whiff of something sour and oily, tugging at your gut like a memory you couldn't place. Father McCready, the last preacher dumb enough to stay, said it was drawn to guilt. "It knows what you've done," he'd mutter, clutching his rosary. "It feeds on the shame you can't outrun." Nobody asked how he knew. Nobody wanted to. Then there was Clara Henshaw. She'd lived in Harrow's Bend her whole life, 73 years of hard winters and harder choices. She wasn't the type to scare easy. Said she'd seen worse than some greasy ghost when her husband drank himself into the grave. But one night, she made the mistake of chasing the smell. It'd been wafting through her kitchen window for hours, thick and cloying, and she'd had enough. Armed with a broom and a flashlight, she marched into the alley behind her house. Her neighbors heard her shout, just once, sharp and furious, then nothing. They found the broom the next day, snapped in half, smeared with that same greasy shine. Clara was gone. I was one of the last to leave. Couldn't take the quiet anymore. The way every creak in the floorboards felt like something waiting. The night I packed my truck, I saw it. Not a glimpse, not a shadow, full on, crouched beneath the streetlight across from my house. It was bigger than I'd imagined, its body a sagging heap of dripping fat, pale and mottled like spoiled meat. Its head tilted up, and I swear it had no face, just a smooth, wet expanse where eyes should have been. But it saw me. I felt it, a cold weight settling in my chest, rooting me to the spot. My hand brushed the doorframe as I stumbled back, and my fingers came away slick. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it, thick and heavy, pressing down, its rancid stink filling my lungs. I left at dawn, drove until the tank ran dry, and I haven't been back. But sometimes, late at night, I catch a whiff of something sour in the air. I check my windows, my doors, my mirrors, and every so often I find a smudge, faint, greasy, glistening in the dark. Harrow's Bend is still there, rotting away on the edge of nowhere. If you're ever dumb enough to drive through, keep your eyes on the road. Don't touch anything that shines. And whatever you do, don't stop to look. Because the Tallow Skulker's still out there, waiting for the ones who can't run fast enough.